You might think unevolved Pokemon are nothing to fear. They're just so cute and cuddly. But what if I told you that there are some little tykes that are so brutally overpowered that even they have been banned from tournaments? We're going to go over every unevolved Pokemon that has ever been banned from Little Cup, the competitive format where first stage Pokemon do battle at level 5. And trust us, there's a lot. So we're going to rapid fire these, starting with Scyther. Everyone getting ready to try Little Cup has the same thought. Hey, Scyther is just as good as a lot of evolved Pokemon, if not better. I bet it's great in Little Cup. They're right, of course, but not quite in the way they imagined. Scyther has the same base stat total as its evolutions, Scizor and Kleavor, which means it towers over everything in Little Cup with its outrageously disproportionate power and speed, because it is indeed the equivalent of letting a fully evolved Pokemon loose in the tier. Every other Pokemon on this list has been banned from Little Cup after having destroyed the tier. However, briefly, Scyther is unique for always having been banned from Little Cup without ever having been allowed in a single battle. It is Little Cup's original Uber. Yes, that's right, it is effectively Gen 1 Mewtwo, except even Mewtwo at the peak of its powers couldn't automatically destroy quite literally everything the way Scyther would have in any generation of Little Cup. It only took a few days for Sneasel to follow Scyther in Gen 4's earliest days. These two were part of the Big Five whose destruction of the tier led to their bans and set in motion the development of the metagame proper. Sneasel was banned alongside Yanma and followed by Tangela and Meditite. Sneasel was similar to Scyther in that it utilized its high attack and speed to bludgeon everything in sight, but if its attack wasn't quite as impressive, though still very strong, it more than made up for it with an absolutely ludicrous speed that left everything in the dust. You couldn't even necessarily check it with a Choice Scarf thanks to Ice Shard, often boosted by Swords Dance. Sneasel's inherent traits of overwhelming speed and great power were such that it was unanimously voted for the initial ban list in Generation 5. In Gen 6, it was allowed again for some reason that probably made a bit of sense to someone important at that time, ridiculous as it seems now, and as it seemed to just about everyone back then too. There were even some top players who claimed Sneasel was banned even before it officially received the axe because of how foregone a conclusion it seemed. It didn't take long at all for Sneasel to get kicked back upstairs because of how massively it had been improved with Steel no longer resisting Dark and Knockoff having been buffed. Its item removing effect especially terrifying in the world of viability that was hinging on Eviolite and Berry Juice. Yeah, there were fairy types now, otherwise known as other Pokemon ruined by Knockoff, and of course Sneasel would destroy them outright as well. Sneasel so dominated Gen 6 Little Cup for the month or so that it was allowed, the tier was sometimes casually referred to by the player base as Sneasel's stomping grounds, before it was returned to the ban list that it arguably never should have left, and indeed would never leave again, as the player bases in Gen 7, 8, and 9 had the sense to not unleash the terror of Icicle Crash Sneasel at all. To top this all off, Gen 9 introduced Sneasel's Hisuian form, who was just as powerful and fast, meaning the effect was much the same, just with a poison fighting stab combination, which was no less vicious. In fact, for raw strain, it hit even harder between the gunk shots and close combats in Unleashed, leading to a quick ban and the delightful fact of both Sneasels being too strong for Little Cup. And we continue our trend of originally standalone Pokemon being too strong with our next mon. But before we get to the next Pokemon, we have a word from our sponsor, Monly, a top 5 language learning app with over 125 million downloads worldwide. It's spring break, but when school is back, some of you probably have language courses to take. Lucky for us, Monly has an exclusive limited time spring sale. Monly is offering 96% off of lifetime access. And that's a steal because Monly offers language lessons in over 1,320 language combinations. What do you mean by combinations, you might wonder? Is this Pokemon? Well, Monly offers 41 foreign languages to learn from 33 native languages. My native tongue is English, of course, and I've always wanted to learn Japanese. So I just imported that and I can quickly start several American English to Japanese courses. Monly is designed in a way to make language speaking proficiently through daily use. To do so, it has daily lessons where I can build up my proficiency in Japanese by taking a 10-minute lesson each day. And the best part about it is that a lot of the content on here is practical and focused for very specific conversations. You can even chat with a chatbot that has speech recognition in order to perfect your dialogue. Every lesson and audio material are recorded with a fluent speaker. That's right, you get all of this and more when you download Monly. So if you want to practically steal all of this content and also support the channel to help us produce more content, click our link in the description below to take advantage of Monly's spring sale. Get 96% off lifetime access to all languages. And thank you so much to Monly for sponsoring this video. Tangela is another one of those Pokemon that, having originally had stats meant to function as a standalone base Pokemon, wound up being overwhelming upon gaining an evolution and being released into Little Cup. It wasn't a day one ban type of Pokemon, but once its chlorophyll set was discovered, Tangela rode its sun abuse all the way to the bank. Then Gen 5 came around, and Tangela received two incredible tools. First, its bulk was catapulted to stratospheric levels with Eviolite, and second, it can now use Regenerator to make it a real hit taker, despite that very concept being anathema to the Little Cup ethos. Tangela was tested again, but it was quickly elevated to the status of Scyther and Sneasel because it was so bulky and so strong. Early XY, with both Tangela and Yanma allowed, the Tangma metagame, as it was called, was one of the most chaotic Little Cup tiers ever, with Tangela in particularly ruling the roost. Whether it was abusing Chlorosun or regenerating, even with regen, it still hit incredibly hard. Tangela is simply fundamentally at odds with Little Cup. Speed is also almost everything in Little Cup, where the frailty of level 5 Pokemon means many games are speed kill style trades of one-upsmanship between increasingly faster threats. This is especially true of the Eviolite lacking Diamond and Pearl Little Cup, the fastest metagame of all time, and that's why Yanma was incredibly broken, to the point of receiving such an early ban. Even post Eviolite, Yanma being able to so effortlessly outspeed everything wasn't healthy for the tier either. Eviolite could only do so much to slow down Yanma's incredibly brutal stab combination. It was too strong for how limited it was in answers, given how quickly and easily it rendered the fastest choice Scarfers useless. Alternatively, with the accuracy boost in Compound Eyes, it suddenly unleashed an accurate hypnosis. Yanma is another case of Little Cup royalty. The only reason it doesn't get the all gens treatment is that it wasn't actually in Gen 8, though if it was, it absolutely would not have remained in the tier. Rounding out the initial wave of bans in early Gen 4 Little Cup is Meditite, which takes the concept of overwhelming power to the foremost extreme. It was renowned for making even the mighty Cranidos look weak, and with the evolved form of Cranidos theorem in mind, Meditite was also a much better Pokemon overall. Everything already hits incredibly hard in Little Cup thanks to the mechanics, but with pure power, this goes way too far. The KOs against just about everything were too automatic. Even the introduction of Eviolite just meant the Meditite user had to think for 5 seconds instead of just one on how they were going to crush everything in sight. Meditite is just too strong for Little Cup, almost like a Pokemon equivalent of the banned Dragon Rage and Sonic Boom. And what's especially impressive is that it's the only one of these original Ubers to not have originally been designed as a standalone Pokemon, which wound up qualifying for Little Cup through an evolution after the fact. Meditite is true Little Cup through and through, which makes its peerless demolition of the tier all the more satisfying. Murkrow's ban was less automatic in Gen 4 and fittingly had ups and downs in Gen 5 as well. It was actually banned about half a year into the metagame, then was unbanned a little over half a year later, before eventually getting banned after the generation had ended. Eventually, it established itself as another one of those Pokemon that was just inherently too much for Little Cup, which was fitting given its original status as a standalone Pokemon, and only missed out on the honor of being banned in every generation by virtue of its exclusion from Gen 8, which it absolutely would have gotten canned from. Being banned in every gen it's in is still quite the achievement, of course. Murkrow was fast, meaning it had little issue delivering unbelievable amounts of carnage with Brave Bird, and whatever outsped it tended to be in great danger of getting crushed by its Sucker Punch, one of the strongest priority moves in the game. Its excellent sub-roost set both helped ease prediction and offset residual damage, and as a whole, its variety really made it overwhelming. Once Gen 6 came around, nothing like a nice Life Orb Heat Wave to thrash the Poniard that resisted its stabs, or the Berry Juice Substitute Thief set that terrorized just about everything, as if its strength and speed didn't already do that. As the subject of a major suspect in Gen 4, some months after the release of the Heart Gold and Soul Silver that had gifted a nasty plot, the Misdreavus test was an event. Its controversy stemmed from how it didn't even need a boost to naturally steamroll most of the tier, from its tremendous stats and set of resist, alongside the Munchlax ruining Will-O-Wisp, and its superb stat priority Shadow Snake, whose greatest utility was providing an advantage against, well, other Misdreavus. You had a lot of Misdreavus speed ties deciding games in this meta. Its usage broke an absolutely mind-boggling 70%. Misdreavus' cousin Fluttermane didn't even have a full 40% when it was banned. Misdreavus just got better upon having its bulk bolstered by Eviolite in Gen 5, slicing through everything with its power, speed, and utility. It didn't wind up banned until after the generation had ended, after several attempts at that, but it was well earned with the long-standing ire the player base had for it. Once Gen 6 took away Steel's ability to resist Ghost though, forget it. Whether Nasty Plot or Choice Scarf, Misdreavus thrashed everything in sight and cemented itself as another no-doubt Pokemon, which was always going to be too good for Little Cup, as would have been the case in every generation had it not taken the National Dex hiatus in Gen 8. Fluttermane wishes it was Little Cup Misdreavus. And here's our first Pokemon not banned in Little Cup's inaugural generation, though it certainly was considered for it. Gligar was elite in Gen 4 Little Cup, right up there with King Munchlax. Come Black and White though, it went to Little Cup Uber Heaven, and would do so for every single subsequent generation it existed in. It got banned twice in Black and White, and continued afterwards not just for the outright strength of sets like Sub Swords Dance, but for incredible set variety that let it do basically everything too well. It was going to carry out its tasks, and there was very little you could do to stop it. Even after you figure out what it's doing, it was too all-encompassing and too impactful. Finally, another true first stage Pokemon. It wasn't just that Dragon Dance Scraggy was fast and strong with great dual stats, but that it was a setup sweeper with such good bulk with Eviolite and incredible options for its ability. Scraggy was considered a suspect repeatedly in Gen 5 and seemed palatable, but the player base eventually pushed it to a post-gen ban. In Gen 8, Fairy types were at a low point thanks to an influx of poison types being used to check Grookey, resulting in a feast for Scraggy, especially with Sticky Web support to nullify Choice Scarfer's revenge killing ability. It chalked up its second ban in the same tiering move that acts webs, as even without them, Scraggy was considered oppressive. Finally, Gen 9 Scraggy was a truly ridiculous Dragon Dance sweeper with terrestrialization, incredibly monstrous on a Pokemon which already threatened to take over the game so quickly and easily. Permanent Sun was so powerful, Vulpix wound up being used in Gen 5's lower tiers to the effect of drought bans. Shocker that Little Cup wasn't the exception in being able to handle the power of Perma Sun. Chlorophyll, Bellsprout, and Oddish terrorized the tier with Stab Solar Beam, and especially Bellsprout's monstrous Weather Ball. Sun came roaring back in Gen 7 with the Gale Wings nerf and the addition of Z-moves. Bellsprout's Acid Downpour was particularly overbearing, while Bulbasaur joined the fray as well, leading to another Vulpix ban. Vulpix was actually banned in Gen 8 for doing the exact same thing. However, we're not officially counting it because Sun continued to be so powerful that Chlorophyll itself was tested and banned, which led to Vulpix being unbanned. In Gen 9 though, day 1 ban. Vulpix's Hail and Snow summoning Alolan counterpart was up to similar mischief, earning the Vulpix line the double whammy of having both forms banned in Gen 9, with the player base not wanting to put up the hassle of Alolan Vulpix, knowing it would end in an eventual ban after their Gen 8 experience, where the effortlessly set Aurora Veil unleashed the overbearing threat of already terrifying setup sweepers like Nassiplot Vullaby. Drifloon combined Unburdened doubling speed upon the same item consumption that activated the full power of Stab Acrobatics, alongside the Berry Juice Recycle combination to brutal effect. It burned opponents and then sub-stall them out until they were into Acrobatics range, reactivating Berry Juice's recovery anytime with Recycle. In case that wasn't enough, it could also ruin the sub-Recycle set's checks like Porygon and Chinchou by running Calm Mind instead, unleashing vicious stab hexes on burned foes. It was the last Pokemon to get canned in Gen 6, then was retested in Sun and Moon since burn damage had been nerfed. But that didn't really offset its power, and it got banned again, and then again in Gen 8. Why not in Gen 9? It no longer has access to Recycle, but only becoming palatable once Game Freak nerfs you is quite an achievement. And speaking of Unburdened, Swirlix's Belly Drum antics, which activated Berry Juice, which made it healthy and activated Unburdened, made it monstrously overpowered in the most self-evident sense, almost identical to how its evolution would later get banned from UU. What really made Swirlix insane though was that this wasn't even the only thing it could do. The eventual discovery of its Cotton Guard Calm Mindset with boosted stab draining kisses really pushed it over the edge. Swirlix had two completely game-breaking sets with completely different answers, meaning that initial turn where you didn't know what it would do could spell the end. Plus, the overwhelming nature of these sets meant, alongside their limited answers, it could often just beat you through sheer power too. To this day, it's difficult to name a setup sweeper better than Swirlix at any point in Little Cup history, which is why it was also banned in Gen 7 and 8, and would surely have been banned had it been in Gen 9. In our 2021 Aipom and Ambipom video, we referred to Gen 7 Aipom as Little Cup's Mega Rayquaza for how it outsped and deleted everything with the ludicrous power of its 5-hit stab tail slap that takes full advantage of level 5 mechanics for levels of power that make Meditite look quaint, especially because you can't even focus sash against it thanks to the multi-hit mechanic. This being roughly 4 years later, we'd like to update this for how Aipom continues to be far too strong for the tier. It is now the Miraidon of the tier. If it were around in Gen 8, it would have been the Zacian Crown. You get the picture. With the addition of this one move, Aipom ascended to Little Cup Uber's royalty. You'd almost sooner convince the player base to retest Scyther. Almost. The Volcarona of Little Cup though at first, Cutiefly was more akin to Venomoth because its great strength was baton passing those quiver dancers to teammates that then became ridiculously scary. Chinchou, Vullaby, Magnemite, and Cutiefly's typing ensured it would always find setup opportunity against the fighting infested Little Cup. Cutiefly also wielded quiver dance boosts as a ferocious sweeper in its own right. Moonblast cutting through most everything in its path, and boosted Psychic slamming would-be poison checks, with Hidden Power Ground assisting against fires and steels. It got banned again in Gen 8, even without Hidden Power, instead wielding Roost to become a multi-boosting tank. In Gen 9 with Terra, it was banned twice. First, because both the Sticky Web setter and the Quiver Dancer were overbearing, but then Sticky Web as a whole was banned. Now, you'd think you'd have to have a Screw Loose to make the connection from Sticky Web is banned to let's retest Cutiefly, but Pokemon players tend to be gluttons for punishment, and Cutiefly knocked their lights out repeatedly until it got axed for doing the same Quiver song and dance as it had before. Gastly was an incredibly powerful threat going back to Gen 4, with the only thing really holding it back from smashing through everything was its major weakness to Pursuit. You could almost compare it to Gen 5 OU Latios in this regard. A healthy dynamic? Arguably not, especially once Steels no longer resisted Shadow Ball, but that's how it was. Colored us surprised, then downright bamboozled, that with Pursuit's removal from the game in Gen 8, Gastly immediately became one of the most outrageously broken Pokemon around. Battles were basically just spamming your Gastly and trying not to lose to the opponents, which often meant attempting to win the Gastly speed tie. Just as Ghost Spam overtook OU and Ubers, so too in Little Cup, especially in Gen 9, with Terra. Just as Caloric Shadow got itself spectacularly banned from Ubers, so too did Little Cup rid itself of the prospect of terrestrialized Gastly, leaving naught but smithereens in its wake. The controversy of trapping comes to Little Cup in the form of Gothita, which wielded much the same tricks that its evolution had, en route to ruining OU and even Ubers in the previous generation. Gothita was already a good Pokemon in Gen 6, but in Gen 7, the power creep meant that Gothita's enabling antics went overboard. Considering it could be customized to trap just about anything, it didn't even necessarily have to KO its target. Simply tricking a Choice Scarf would often be sufficient. Then in Gen 8, you couldn't even pursue it anymore, and voila! Gothita was often seen trapping multiple targets per game. It was absolutely unreal levels of support for anything, let alone the Pokemon that were already the best around, especially since U-turn spam from the likes of Mienfoo meant Gothita had no issue hitting the field. Porygon was always a great Little Cup Pokemon. It was particularly great in Gen 4, but in Gen 7, Z conversion made it so frightening, it was a real contender for Swirlix's throne as scariest sweeper ever, an Omniboost becoming an electric type, so Terra before Terra, and thus gained Stab Thunderbolt on a Pokemon that was already very good in its own right. Who would have seen that crushing everything, especially if it picked up another special attack boost from download. No Z moves in Gen 8, so it seemed like a one-off, but then Gen 9 came around and basically allowed Porygon to repeat its Gen 7, except with even greater freedom. In addition to reversing its weaknesses and gaining Terra Blast, it could also run an item, meaning it could either go bulky with Eviolite while agility boosted its speed tie, or it could go for the immediate approach with Choice Scarf, all while downloading special attack boosts left and right. You know how Gothita was broken? Well, in Gen 7, Trapinch wasn't far off, acting as a sort of cross between Gothita and Diglett, combining the former's capacity for Eviolite boosted bulk, letting it switch in quite easily, with the latter's Arena Trap and Stab Earthquake to lay the smackdown on the limited pool of answers to the already frightening threats like Vullaby and Abra. It's already bad enough to try and answer those Pokemon when your counter isn't at risk of forcible removal from the game, but with that, you wind up making ridiculous moves like keeping your fighting type in on Abra because you don't want to get double switched on, and so it just psychics and KOs you for free. That's the kind of desperate move you make when you know there's a Trapinch lurking. Mr. Briney's Pico was finally let loose on the competitive scene in Gen 7, where it dispatched trainers and interpreted as goons from Team Magma and Aqua with a single-minded, ruthless pursuit of revenge. Its dual stab combination was utterly ferocious. Hurricane is one of the most spammable attacks there is, with its great coverage and power, and in true Tornadus fashion, Wingull brandished it off of a superb speed stat, hitting the coveted benchmark of 19. It went beyond just 30% confusion frustrating opponents, should the 70% accuracy cooperate. Plinium Z meant not only were accuracy woes gone for a crucial turn, but Supersonic Sky Strike's added power would bring the house down. What a flying resist, you ask reasonably. Ah yes, those Pokemon like Pawniard and Tortuga, which are utterly horrified by the prospect of switching into Wingull's other nasty 30% stab, Scald, and eating a ruinous burn. These moves were so powerful, Wingull transcended its unimpressive special attack and had the metagame in a chokehold where they were relying on the otherwise unreliable Chinchou to stop its relentless assault. Ultimately though, they could only do that with a ban. Cherum is famous for only existing in the competitive scene insofar as to activate its endless battle by permanently switching between forms under the effects of the Acid Rain glitch in Gen 4 cartridges. Otherwise, it is completely worthless. Thus, it pleases us greatly to report that its pre-evolution so terrorized Little Cup with its chlorophyll antics, wielding a vicious weather ball for coverage. As a result, Sun was banned repeatedly in Little Cup. Vulpix got the axe first, but Sun kept being spammed because of how scary the chlorophyll abusers were, and eventually chlorophyll itself was banned. This is true, but before Vulpix was banned, Cherubi itself was ousted from the tier as it was considered the only problematic chlorophyll abuser. It wielded the massive boost of growth under sun to devastating ends, whether with Eviolite's bulk or Life Orb's greater power. Of course, the subsequent ban of chlorophyll in its entirety means that Cherubi is still banned in effect since it has no alternate ability. But still, in a meta characterized by breakneck offense even more than Ubers, to see a bulky Pokemon dominate so utterly is borderline surreal. It was basically Swirlix, but for defense. Nothing else could match its walling ability. Its enormous bulk went hand in hand with an oppressive support move pool designed at every corner to further diminish your ability to damage it. Will-O-Wisp, Calm Mind, Strength Sap did so and provided recovery. And even if you manage to get around all of these, its Curse Body ability might well kick in and leave you unable to finish it off with that attack. Entire teams had to gang up to try and break Galarian Corsola. It got banned in quite a hurry. Bringing up Magby, the story of how the lovable goofballs of the Little Cup player base struggled to contain the leopard that was a belly drum sweeper that reached the coveted 19 speed stat and packed priority Mach Punch, meaning that after a single turn of setup, it threatened to end the entire game on the spot, even against healthy teams. Isn't Magby slashing off half its health to set up? That's where dual screen support comes in and really lets it go berserk. You would need multiple active focus sashes to stand a chance. Magby became the last ban of Gen 8 Little Cup, and funnily enough, as this video was being made, Magby got banned from Gen 9 as well. It wasn't even a belly drummer at first. It gained renown for the vicious Life Orb special attacker, with Fire Blast alone melting pretty much everything. You'll Terra Water to check its Fire Blast. Oops, Grass Terra Blast. Terra Dragons next? Belly Drum is back and better than ever, with Terra Fairy. Hot off the presses that Magby has ascended to Little Cup Ubers again. At level 5, Hustle is similar to Pure Power as far as pushing its user into an auto KO territory goes. Pure Power is overkill. It doesn't make a difference if you KO a Pokemon by doing 100% or 150% to it. And Hustle, by virtue of not being as strong as Pure Power, can trick you into thinking it's not all that bad, for a while anyway. Accuracy woes aside, Rufflet's Hustle-fueled Brave Bird was one of the most overpowering no-setup needed attacks in Gen 8 Little Cup, and it was bolstered by the perfect coverage tool in close combat. Rufflet could either really drop things instantly with Choice Band, or it could clean up with Scarf Speed. It not only brutalized the tier, but added an unpleasant RNG element with Hustle accuracy, meaning the player base was all too happy to see it go. And then, in Gen 9, it was Quick Band, because who wanted to go through that again, except they could Terra this time around? Enjoy this piece of artwork commemorating the community's joy over the ban. Meet Woobat, Little Cup's representative for those strategies combining terrains with seeds for wild stored power antics. Not only does the grassy seed it eats after Grookey sets the terrain for it crucially bolster its defense, and by a +2, not a +1, thanks to its simple ability, it also renders it itemless, leaving it quite strong in the face of knockoff, the go-to response for most psychics. Afterwards, it Calm Minds, and again, it's actually using Nasty Plot and Amnesia simultaneously, thanks to Simple. And with this plethora of +2s, its stab stored powers is already primed to shatter just about everything, especially since it's quite impenetrable on both sides, but also commonly came packed with dual screen or sticky web support. If you're going to commit this hard, that sweeper better bring the goods, and Woobat certainly delivered. Too well, in fact, leading to its ban. Belly Drum alongside Stab Extreme Speed seemed like it was primed to make Zigzagoon the Little Cup Extreme Killer, but it took until Gen 8 for that to materialize in a broken form. When it did though, the brokenness was such that it triumphed over all of Zigzagoon's numerous other flaws. Previously, Zigzagoon had been mitigated by several top-tier options for eating Extreme Speed without getting blown up by other options. Onyx, Magnemite, Pawniards, Ghosts. Now it's not like every answer disappeared, but things changed a lot, and Zigzagoon pounced. Right place, right time. The Gastly ban, low Onyx usage, where Vullaby was banned, Steel's easy to overwhelm or trap. Basically, though it was high risk, Zigzagoon's reward was far too high. Forget Woobat. This demonic Gen 9 incarnation of Psychic Stored Power Terror was, in fact, the Little Cup version of Espathra that was on the fast train to getting axed from OU. Difficult to believe though it may be, a speed boosting Calm Minder unleashing hyper boosted stab stored powers you couldn't withstand or outspeed, in fact, did make quick work of the tier. Even your Dark type was one terror away from being brutalized. Screen support helped it get going, especially useful on the physical side, but really, Flittle could just pop into battle at almost any time and win practically on the spot. It really is a wonder this one got booted. Diglett has been a Little Cup staple for generations, so it feels bizarre that it took this long for it to actually get banned. Did Trapinch really beat it to the punch? Diglett was cementing Arena Trap as the ban, and not Dugtrio in Gen 5 OU way before it actually got axed in Little Cup. Oh right, Terra. You thought Diglett was a pain before, with its tier best 20 speed, but at least was still comparatively limited in the actual damage it can dish out, as opposed to now, where it got basically stab mega hit in power. Diglett's impact reached worrying levels. Air balloon sets began seeing use for guarding against opposing Diglett. Ultimately, Terra didn't just break the Camerot's back so much as shatter its spine into a million pieces, leading to Diglett's ban. Snivy and his contrary Leaf Storm saw Gen 9 push it over the edge thanks to Terra. It lost hit and power, but now got something far more game-breaking through gaining powerful coverage that also functioned as a second stab alongside its mighty Leaf Storm. Alternatively, it could Terra Grass and really drive its ferocious Leaf Storms down the highway to the danger zone. It made Scar Snivy one of the most lights-out cleaners imaginable. Helping matters more was the ever-reliable Glare ruining the speed of something like Terra Steel Meanfu and Snivy's solid bulk with Eviolite. It really was the whole package. Rotom mode comes to Little Cup with Voltorb's blazing speed. Hisuian Voltorb brandishes beautifully synergistic typing of strong stab Volt Switch alongside stab Giga Drain or Leaf Storm, and a lack of ground weakness to threaten ground types looking to block its momentum grabbing. Late game, it possessed an incredible number of possible Terra types. This level of variety and unpredictability made Hisuian Voltorb a Swiss Army knife of offensive threat, able to wear the opponent down with utility before launching into its more overwhelming late game form. And now we'll be grouping the many Pokemon which gained evolutions in Gen 9, creating new Little Cup Pokemon which were clearly not intended for the format. This doesn't necessarily have to matter, but it tends to. Like Duraludon. Is it really a shocker that Mini Dialga was too much for Little Cup? Some seem more reasonable than others though. Girafarig and Stantler are hardly stars, but then you realize, yeah, look at what they're facing. They may as well be Scyther. Next, Basculin White Striped, which is identical in stats to Basculin, with attack and speed far above the Little Cup average, and another auto KO ability, Adaptability. The same goes for Hisuian Quillfish, which packs the same stats as its single-stage Johto counterpart. Finally, Dunsparce goes from languishing in everything Shadow to casting that very big Shadow itself in Little Cup. And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus, Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Bingleton, Daniel Isbeast, Funky, Glitcherton, Howl, Megamon VGC, Nurse Jake, Jack G, Pretzel SP, Soljiro Sakura, Spavoon, Gylaria, Soras and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin, Kiboflu for their major support of our videos.